Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Today's guest, one of my great friends, the host of the John Keim Report, which also has a live stream tonight on YouTube at 7:30. So make sure you check that out on the Empire Media page. Of course, his day job is to write for ESPN.com, where it has been a busy day for, well, you probably guessed it based off the podcast tease. It is the John Keim Report. Ladies and gentlemen, John Keim. Cakes, how are you?
What up, Craig? How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm excited to have you on. What a day to have you. We don't get to do this often, and there is plenty to talk about. Let's just go chronologically here. Sweat, they trade to Chicago for a second-round pick, which I think most people think, barring something weird happening with the Bears, is going to be a very good second-round pick. When did you kind of get the feeling like, oh, wow, they could get a really valuable piece in return for Montez, and how hard was it for them to, even with that on the table, part with a guy that they really like?
Yeah, I think, well, for that value, I think it's a lot easier. That is a high second-round pick. So I think, yes, listen, over the weekend, and late last week, you'd hear third-round pick, and that was always you're going to always have to at least start there. So that was always going to be a starting point, but the second-round pick is what you kept hearing that they wanted, and you really can't give up a guy like Montez Sweat for something lower than that, in my opinion, even more so than Chase for a variety of reasons. And so I think yesterday you'd hear, and I know Ben Standing reported it and I heard it as well later, which was third round pick, but a conditional one that would turn into a 2 if you extend them. And I without knowing for sure, I think that may have been from Atlanta. So, that, and I know Atlanta was very much interested in him. He was interested in Atlanta very much. So that made sense. So if the Bears going to get him, you got to go higher. And they did. And, now the question is for them to make it work, to keep him around, you may have to tag him, because I don't know, is that a situation you want to resign? I mean, I guess we'll find out, and if anybody pays you, then it works. But I think, that's on the Bears end. But from this end, a high second round pick now gives you that's now, 3 picks, top 50. And that's pretty good.
No doubt. And that's in a loaded draft. And I'm excited, actually, bottom of the hour, we're going to have Trevor Sikkema from PFF, who does draft stuff year round, talk about what that means in this particular draft, where they're going to need a lot of different pieces. The O-line hopefully finally gets addressed. We'll see about quarterback, all that kind of stuff. But then Chase comes along, the deal later. A lot of people thought, maybe they'd be done after Montez. Nope, they trade both. And the value, I think, is the biggest question here, John. What was the market for Chase Young, and why does it seem, based off his youth, his potential, to be so depressed?
The knee. It's simple. It's the knee. And, there were definitely concerns. I talked to multiple people throughout the process, and especially over the last 24 hours, who all said the same thing. I don't want to say whether it was questions or concerns about the medical. And so that's going to depress the market. There was interest in him because a lot of teams were calling in, and this wasn't a recent thing. Teams have been calling on these guys for a couple months. This is not new. So this is not something that starts to heat up because oh my God, the trade deadline's near. Let's start calling. These have been ongoing discussions for a couple months. So they knew that teams would be interested in it, but again, the medical was always something. And I hear it from other teams, other people involved. Would that be a hindrance? And then you look at a team like the Niners, well, it makes sense. They had multiple third-round picks. And if he doesn't stay there, they could get it back as a comp pick, but it's not a huge loss for them to give up that capital. So they made sense. So I knew that they were interested. You heard the Bears at one point, and that's why I was surprised that Montez went to the Bears and not Young. But I think, again, the Niners made sense because of their extra third-round picks. But that definitely hurt his market. And I think the other part is then it's the durability, but then it's also the lack of a contract for next year. So that all plays into it, and that's why, because it's clearly the guy has a lot of talent, and in a one-for-one world, he's going to get more, but that's not how it operates here.
Right. John
Other
Keim.
teams got more.
Yeah. John Keim, ESPN, is with us. So, John, this kind of gets me to the Brian Windhorst. And I know you're familiar with this meme as an NBA guy yourself. Like the Brian Windhorst, like, why would they do that kind of thing here, right? Because if that is the case, right, the medical, well, then you've got 9 games to see how he plays. You hope he plays well. And even if you tag and trade him in the offseason, it seems like you could get more. But they did it now. Why now? And to me, the most plausible thing, and I don't know all the details, but I can read some tea leaves, is they might think this is an addition by subtraction situation. And you look at, I watch the tape. You watch the tape. I work with a guy who watches more tape than anybody in Logan. We see the effort level on some of these plays from Chase. We also heard his comments a couple weeks ago where he's like, I have to be a better leader in this. And you're like, well, what are you doing? What are you waiting for? And so, is there, I don't know, what you know here and what you can say, but, is there an addition by subtraction element that answers the why now question?
Listen, anybody who wants to read between the lines can read that right now. So, you're not doing it if you think he can still – if he's going to really help you win. This is a group that has to win, but they also were tasked with making smart football moves. And they don't, he clearly wasn't going to come back here because why would you take a third rounder for him now? So yeah, anybody can read between the lines on this one. This isn't a fire sale. This wasn't a demand from the owner that you got to do this. This is a team that thinks that they can still compete, even after trading 2 of their former first round picks. And, it's funny, Craig, because, and we'll see if they're right. Here's the other, Chase Young is going to a good spot. The guy can still rush the passer. There are things that he's still a freakish talent, but I also wonder, Craig, too, and you're a basketball guy. Sometimes I look at this defensive line, and I thought it was telling what Ron Rivera said Monday when we asked him about the line, and he's, just have they met expectations? The answer is they've just been inconsistent. So they've been inconsistent for a couple of years with these 4 first-round picks together. It wasn't going to change. So why invest in that? And if you think it can be improved. But I go back to the basketball analogy, which is you have 4 guys who are alpha male, 20-point alpha male scorers. And does that always work? I think that's tough. So I think you can get – I think what you want – I think what they're going to do with this setup is you have 2 high-priced, very, very good defensive tackles who have made the Pro Bowl, deservedly. And now you'll put in ends who the whole do your job mantra, I think, that'll become a bigger thing. But, that you rush discipline, right? All that stuff. And here's the other thing, Chase Young would get criticized a lot for, or at least pegged for, he's freelancing. All those guys were doing that after a while. So it wasn't just him. So it's unfair just to say it was him. However, you can look at, and again, you can read between the lines however you want in this one and probably be accurate. But I think that if they really wanted to keep him and make it work, they would have found a way.
Right. John Keim, ESPN, is with us. You mentioned that this is not like a demand from ownership. What were the nature of the conversations as far as you know? Our friend and your former ESPN colleague now with The Athletic, Diana Rossini, reported that Josh Harris did have some input here in terms of at least some direction. What color can you provide to kind of detail that out?
Yeah. I've been talking about that. That's not – he's the owner, for God's sake. Of course he does.
People seem to forget that.
Jesus, the guy paid $6 billion. Of course he's involved. And, this is something I've been talking about. That's just – yes. Anyways, no comment. But it's of course he's involved. He was always going. The whole thing with Harris, and I've talked about this a lot, mentioned it in story or whatever. That the whole, with him, his MO has been bring me information, get information, bring it to me. Let's make a good decision. That's how his other organizations work, and it's how he's working here in this case. So this I think the funny thing is, Craig, a lot of people were like, well, how could Ron Rivera be making this decision? He might get fired, blah, 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 which is all true. And it's all fair. But if you're this coaching staff, the way you can save your job is to A, make a good football decision with his moves, and then B, win. if you don't make the good football decision but win games, I think you're gone, right? Because like this guy's going to want people who make good football decisions, and that's how they're going to view this. And because it does, I don't think it's 2 years ago when they didn't have these guys, they were 4-2. They didn't have Sweat and Young for 6 games. They were 4-2. So it's not like, and their defensive numbers were dramatically better for whatever reason. But the point is, they won without them. They played well without them. Whether it was because they weren't there, that you can debate that. But the numbers are what they are. So they don't have to feel like they're punting on their season. But from a staff standpoint, this is the right move. Now go win. And if you don't, somebody else will benefit from all these picks.
How do you think their chances change of that? Like, they got rid of 2 players that are exceptional individual talents. We just talked about the details of what's happened when they've been out in the past. There's no argument to be made that like this was working, the current setup. They're 28th. I've said these stats a million times today. They're 28th in defensive DVOA. They're 31st in points. They're 31st in yards. They're not good on that side of the ball.
No.
So when you talk about how it functionally works now, like what, and hey, now the mission is to go win. I guess the question really is like, what chances do you give them of that actually working out in their favor? Or is this a fundamentally flawed football team that has 9 games until the plane lands on the runway that it seems like is in sight?
Listen, to think that this is going to be like, okay, these guys are gone, they're going to play better. I'm not going to go there because I can't. I know what they did in the past. The coverage has been bad all year, and now, first of all, like A.J. Brown is tremendous. So, like coverage all year, they've given up big play after big play after big play. And it's not just because, these guys are freelancing up front. And again, it wasn't just there are 2 of them, right? It was, after a while, it just felt like, hey, this guy's doing this, I'm going to go do this. And not all the time, but certainly it felt like that at times. So it can't just be like, okay, these guys are gone. Now the coverage is going to be better. Now they're not going to make, now they're not going to blow a coverage assignment that leads to a Devontae Smith touchdown. You know what I mean? You still got to do all that. You still have to protect Sam Howell. But I think the feeling certainly is if Howell and the offense can play the way they did Sunday, it gives them a chance. And, but again, they still have to play better on defense. I'd be silly to think that this is going to be the magic elixir to turn this defense around. They have to play better, and they have not shown that they can be consistent. But the weird thing with this defense has been that the last couple of years, it's like they're really bad for one half and really good for another. But can they do that? I don't know.
That makes all of us, John. That's why they play the games. As an old man in a probably a Paisley tie once said. All right, John Keim, ESPN. You can read his work there. I definitely want to read his coverage on ESPN.com, but also do not miss the John Keim Report. Phenomenal podcast. It's kind of become a running joke, John, as you know, because you actually listen to Take Command, which we very much appreciate. Yeah. But you very, very frequently get shout-outs on that show because the podcast is great, the John Keim Report, and that includes his live stream tonight, 7:30 on the Empire Media page on YouTube. Cakes, always appreciate it. Hopefully I'll see you soon, and thanks for the time here on the radio.
I appreciate it, and if you're joining me tonight for the live stream, bring some Twix bars and some Kit Kats. Thank you.
There you go. By request. Make sure get Cakes what he wants. All right. Thanks, John. That is John Keim, everybody. Quick reaction to that. Next, maybe sneak in a call or two, and then Pro Football Focus's Trevor Sikkema joins us coming up at 5:30. The Commanders have all these picks now. What can they do with them? Trevor covers the draft year-round. He's phenomenal. That's coming up here on the Team 980.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.